At 49, Nora Tillman owned $1 bill, a foreclosure file, and her husband's old pocket watch stopped at 4:11, the minute his heart quit. She still wound it every morning. It still never moved. The cancer took him slow, and it took the savings down with him. When the house went, his family went too. They decided the lost money was her fault and stopped answering the phone. So she did what foreclosed people do. She kept moving. The county tax sale in Marston had one lot nobody would raise a hand for. A dead railroad tower, 31 years dry, leaning on rotted timber legs at the edge of a torn-up spur line. The clerk read it twice. The room laughed. Nora paid her $1. She thought she'd bought a place to sleep out of the wind. She hadn't. Something had been riveted inside that tank since before she was born, waiting on the one person who'd ever climb up to find it. But that morning began like every ending she already knew by heart. The gate stuck. It hung on one good hinge, and the bottom corner had dug a small trench in the dirt over the years, so it caught there every time. Nora set her shoulder to it and pushed, and it gave with a sound like a held breath let go. Beyond it, the lot was a half-acre of frost-killed weeds and gravel, fenced-in sagging chain link. The tower stood at the center of it. 4 timber legs, gray as old bone. A steel tank above them, round and dented, streaked down its sides in long stripes of rust the color of a struck match. A ladder ran up one leg to a hatch near the top. The whole thing leaned, just slightly, the way a tired man leans when he's been standing too long. She stood and looked at it for a while. The wind came across the flat land without anything to stop it, and went straight through her coat. Then she went to work, because work was the one thing she still knew how to do with her hands. She set her bag down against the concrete footing of the nearest leg, out of the wind. Inside, it was everything she had carried out of her old life. A change of clothes, a thermos, a flashlight, and the watch in its own small cloth, because she would not keep it loose where it might get scratched. She took it out now. The face was yellowed, the second hand frozen at 11. She turned the little crown twice, the way she did every morning, and held it to her ear. Nothing. She put it back in the cloth, and put the cloth in her breast pocket, over the place it belonged, and that was the whole of the morning's grieving. She did not have time for more. The thermos coffee had gone bitter and lukewarm on the drive. She drank it anyway, standing, looking up at the tank. A man could buy this place for $1, because $1 was what it was worth to anyone with sense. There was no water hookup, no power. The nearest road that went anywhere was a quarter-mile back, but there was the footing, flat and dry under the legs, sheltered on the north by the slab of an old pump house that had long since lost its roof. She could put a tarp across that corner. She could be out of the weather by dark. After two years of motels paid by the week and the back seats of cars that belonged to other people, a half-acre with her own name on the deed was not nothing. It was a place that could not put her out. She had come a long way to reach nothing this solid. The house the bank took was the better part of 1,000 miles back east. In a town that had never been hers either, only the place her husband's work had set them down. After it was gone, she'd pointed the truck at no particular horizon and let the road choose, and the road had brought her here. To a county she'd never once set foot in that she knew of. She started with the pump house slab, clearing the brush off it, stacking the loose block along the fence, the way her father-in-law had taught her to stack things, before he decided she was the reason for everything, and stopped teaching her anything at all. By noon, she had cleared a space to sleep. By afternoon, she had run out of things to do that did not involve the tower. She walked the legs of it slowly, the way you walk around a horse you don't know yet. The timber was sound enough at the base, soft at the joints. The tank up top was the question. A railroad tower like this had filled the tenders of steam engines, once 1,000 gallons at a pull, and the line had been dead since before she could remember. Somebody had told her at the auction that the water had been off since '94. 31 years, long enough for a tank to dry out, for the seams to open, for the inside to fill with the dust and the nests of 3 decades. If she could make it hold water again, she thought, She would have something. A cistern. A way to catch the rain off a roof she had not yet built. It was the kind of plan a person makes when they have nothing else to make plans out of. So she climbed. The ladder was iron, cold enough to ache the bones of her hands, and it ran up the north leg to a square hatch in the side of the tank. She went slow, testing each rung. Near the top, the rungs were newer than the ones below, the welds a different color. And she thought nothing of it then. Repairs got made over the years. Somebody had cared for this once. The hatch was held by a swing latch gone solid with rust. She worked it loose with the flat of her flashlight, and it dropped open, and the smell came up at her. Old water, iron, stone that had not seen the sky in a long time. She put the flashlight in her teeth and went in. Inside, the tank was a dim steel room. The light caught the curve of the walls and the long shadows of the support struts. The bottom was dry, scaled over with old mineral, soft drifts of dust banked against the seams. She crouched and ran her glove along the floor and felt the pitting, the places where the steel had thinned. It could be patched. It could be lined. It would be weeks of work, and she had nothing but weeks. She had worked the light down low first, where the rot always is, and then up the curve of the wall to the old overflow collar near the top. The dry band of steel that the water never climbed to even when the tank ran full. That was where it caught on something that was not rust. A plate. About the size of a Bible, set flush into the wall just under the overflow collar, a good arm's reach above the high water line, riveted at the four corners. The rivets were domed and even. The plate itself was a different steel than the wall around it, darker, oiled at some point, so it had not rusted the way everything else had. It did not belong to the tank. A tank wall is built to hold water in, smooth and continuous. There was no reason on earth to set a riveted panel into the inside of one. Nora knelt in front of it and went still. She had spent her married years around men who built and fixed things, and she had learned to read a piece of work the way some people read faces. This was deliberate. Somebody had cut into the wall of a working tank, set a box behind it, and sealed the box in with a plate they had taken pains to protect from the water. They had done it carefully. They had done it to last. She knocked on the wall beside the plate. Solid. She knocked on the plate. Hollow, her breath was loud in the steel room. She told herself it was probably nothing. A toolbox somebody walled up and forgot. A bottle of something a brakeman hid from a foreman 60 years gone. People hid foolish things in foolish places, and the foolishness outlived them. That was all this was. She did not believe it, and she worked at the rivets anyway. It took the rest of the daylight. She had no proper tools, only the flashlight and a flat pry bar she'd found in the rubble, and a length of rebar for a hammer, and she sat, in the cold and the dark of the tank, and worked the corners loose, one at a time. The first rivet head sheared off and rang against the floor. The second. By the third, her hands were shaking, and not from the cold, and she made herself stop and breathe before she went on. Because she had learned a long time ago that the surest way to ruin a thing was to hurry the last of it. When the fourth corner gave, the plate came away in her hands, heavier than its size. Behind it was a recess cut into the wall, lined with tar paper gone brittle, and set into the recess was a box. It was a brakeman strongbox. She knew the kind. Steel, riveted, a hinged lid with a hasp, the sort of thing a railroad man kept his manifests and his pay in. This one had been wrapped once in an oilcloth, and the oilcloth had gone stiff and dark, and it cracked off on her gloves. The box itself was sound. Whoever sealed it in had set it where the water could never reach, and the water never had. She lifted it out and set it on the dry floor between her knees, and did not open it for a moment. The flashlight in her teeth threw her own shadow huge against the curved wall. Somewhere below, far off, a truck went by on the county road, and the sound came up the legs of the tower and faded. Then she opened the lid. The hinge was stiff, but it moved. Inside, the things had been packed tight and packed with care, the way you pack something you mean to outlast you. There was a leather journal, the cover, soft and dark with handling. There was a stack of photographs wrapped in waxed paper. There was a bundle of envelopes, a good 2 inches of them, tied with a length of waxed cord that had once been blue. And under the cord, set on top of the bundle, so it would be the first thing a hand fell on, there was a single sealed envelope, the paper gone the color of weak tea, with a line of writing across the front in a careful hand. She angled the light to read it, to the one who keeps the tower. Nora sat back on her heels. The cold of the steel came up through her knees, and she did not feel it. She had come here to get out of the wind. She had paid $1 for a pile of rusted steel that the whole town had laughed at, and somewhere in the laughing she had let herself believe the joke was true, that this was nothing, that she was somebody who could only ever afford nothing. And a stranger had left her a letter, sealed and waiting, on top of a box that someone had built into a wall before she was born. She did not open the sealed envelope. Some part of her knew already that it was the last thing, the thing you read when you understood the rest. And she did not understand the rest. Not yet. She set it aside on the waxed paper, careful like it could bruise. She picked up the journal instead. The leather was cracked along the spine, and when she opened the cover, the pages were stiff with age but whole, the ink faded but plain. The first page held only a few lines, set down in that same careful hand, the hand of someone taught penmanship in a schoolroom, and made to do it over until it was right. She tilted the flashlight and read the first name written there, and the cold went out of her hands entirely. A surname. At the top of the page, the way a man writes his own name in the front of a book that belongs to him. Hale. She did not read the rest of it in the tank. The cold had gotten into her by then, and the light was going, and some things should not be read, crouched in the dark, with a flashlight in your teeth. She carried the box down the ladder, one-handed, slow, the way you carry something you are afraid of dropping and afraid of holding, and she set it on the slab in her tarp shelter and built a small fire in a steel pail from the scrap wood she'd gathered. Then she sat with the journal in her lap and read Her Father's Hand by Firelight. She knew it was her father's. She had known since the page. Hale was her name before it was anything else, before her mother took her away and made it Faye's name, and made Nora something else, and taught her not to ask. The man in the one photograph she owned wore a brakeman's cap and stood squinting at a camera, and she had been told once, she asked, that he ran off and was no kind of man, and that was the end of it. She was 4. She did not ask again. The journal did not read like a man who ran off. Starting on the tower today, the first real entry said, "Old tank leaks at the 3rd seam. Foreman says let it go. The line's half dead anyway. I told him a thing worth keeping is worth keeping right. Stayed late and pulled the seam myself." The hand was plain and square. He wrote the way he must have talked, in short pieces, no wasted words, and every so often a thing slipped through that was not about the work at all. Faye had the baby Tuesday, a girl, 7 pounds and a temper already. I held her in the yard so she could hear the engines. Faye says I'm foolish. Maybe so. But I wanted the first thing she heard from me to be the thing I'm good at. Nora read that twice. The yard. This yard. The flat ground under the legs of the tower she'd bought for $1 because it was the only thing in the county she could afford. She had not come here knowing any of it. She had run out of road, and the road had run out at the one place her father had ever held her. She did not have a word for what that was, and she did not try to find one. Then she set the journal down on her knee and looked at the fire for a while, and did not let herself make a sound because there was no one to make it to. And a sound let out into an empty lot is a lonelier thing than silence. The fire popped. Somewhere out past the fence a dog barked twice and quit. She read on. He loved the tower. That was the plain fact under everything. He wrote about it, the way other men wrote about a horse or a boat, like it was a living thing that answered to good treatment. He wrote about the water gauge and the pump house, and the long cold mornings filling the tenders before dawn. He wrote about Faye bringing his dinner out in a tin, and the baby getting bigger in the photographs he tucked between the pages. And Nora found them there, 3 of them, a man and a woman and a child on a porch she had never seen. And the man was the man in her one photograph, only younger, only laughing. She put the photographs in her breast pocket, beside the watch, and that was where they stayed. In the morning, she went to town, because she had a tank that might hold water if she could line it, and a body that needed feeding, and $40-some between her and the end of everything. Marston had 4 streets and a grain elevator. There was a hardware store on the main one, an old brick front, with the name worn off the glass, and a man behind the counter who looked at her boots before he looked at her face. "Help you? I need a tank liner," she said. "The brush-on kind, and a wire wheel if you've got one cheap." He told her the price of the liner, and it was more than she had. She stood there a moment, doing the arithmetic she was always doing now. The arithmetic of what she could go without, and the man watched her do it. "You're the one who bought the tower," he said. It wasn't a question. Nobody in that town asked questions they already knew the answer to. "I am. Pruitt knows yet?" "I don't know any Pruitt." The man's mouth did something that wasn't quite a smile. "You will." He pulled a half-used can of liner off a low shelf, the label peeling, and set it on the counter. "Returns. Fella bought it, and changed his mind. I'll do it for $11 since the can's open." He rang it, and she paid, and he gave her the receipt, and she folded it into quarters out of an old habit and put it in her coat. He watched that too. "What's your name?" she asked him. "Renner." "Mr. Renner, thank you, just Renner." He turned back to his shelf. Then, not turning around, he said, "Hale built that tower. The name used to mean something around here. Before my time, my dad spoke well of Hale." He said it like a man laying something on a table and stepping back from it. He was talking about the tower, about a name on an old deed, and he had no idea he'd just said her own to her face. She did not tell him. She was not ready to say it out loud, and she did not yet know what she'd be saying if she did. On the walk back, she saw the flags, little orange survey ribbons, new, tied to stakes driven along the old corridor at even spaces, marching east past her fence toward the open ground. A flatbed sat idling where the rails had been, a winch on the back of it, and a man in the cab watched her go by and did not lift a hand. The flags had not been there a week ago. Somebody was measuring something. She did not know the word for what yet, but she knew the look of men getting ready to take a thing. She had seen it on the faces of her husband's family the month the house went. She walked back out to the lot with the liner and a sack of groceries and her wet boots, because it had started a thin, cold rain on the way, and she worked the tank wall with the wire wheel until her arm gave out, and she did not let herself open the bundle of letters until the work was done. That was a rule she made and kept. The work first. The letters were a thing she could not take back once she'd had them, and she wanted to be a person who had earned them. That night she untied the cord. It had been blue once. It was newer than everything else in the box. She noticed. The journal was soft with 30 years of handling. The oilcloth had gone stiff and cracked, but the cord that bound the letters was only sun-faded, not aged through, as if it had been tied a good deal later than the rest had been made. She noticed it the way you notice a thing you don't yet have a use for. And she set it aside, and she opened the first envelope. It was not addressed to her. None of them were. They were addressed, all of them, in her father's square hand, to a Mr. H. Pell, county recorder, and they had been opened once, long ago, and read and folded back into themselves. She read them in the order the postmarks gave her, and the postmarks gave her 14 years. The first was dated the spring of 1981. Pell. They've gone and done it. I'm to be tried for the yard theft, which I did not do, which you know I did not do, because you saw the manifest same as I did before it went missing. I'm not writing to you to cry about it. I'm writing because if it goes the way these things go, I need a man on the outside I can trust. And you're the only one Asa Pruitt doesn't own. Hold what I send you. Ask me no questions on paper. W. Hale. The hand was the same as the journal, only harder now, pressed deeper into the page. Nora read the next, and the next. They came from a state facility upstate, 2 and 3 a year, and they were short, and they were never about himself. They were about money. Pell. Enclosed is $11. I know it's nothing. Put it by for the girl with the rest. Don't tell Faye it comes from me. She'd send it back, and I don't blame her. Just put it where it grows. W.H. Pell, 43 this time. Good month in the laundry. The girl would be 6 now. Buy her shoes if Faye'll let you say it came from the county or the church, any name but mine. W.H. Pell. The account you set the money in is doing what you said it would. Keep the passbook in the box at the bank. When she's grown, when she comes looking, if she comes looking, it's hers. All of it, I won't see it. That's all right. A man builds a thing so it'll be there after him. I built the tower that way. I'm building this the same. W.H. Nora stopped. She had the letter in both hands, and the fire had burned down to coals, and she had not noticed the cold come back into the lot. She read the line again. The girl would be 6 now, and the next one 2 years on. The girl would be 8. He had counted her. From a cell with nothing, a man she had been taught to forget, had sat down 2 and 3 times a year for 14 years and counted how old she'd gotten and sent whatever he had. $11, $43, a good month in the laundry, and asked a friend to hide his own name so the kindness would land on her clean, with no debt and no shame and no hail attached to it. He had not wanted her to know it came from him. That was the part that undid her, sitting there. Not the money. The money was nothing. The money was shoes. It was that he had spent the last good years of his life making sure she would never have to feel grateful to a man the world had told her was no kind of man. He had loved her in a way that asked for nothing back, not even the knowing of it. The ink on the later letters was smudged in places, the lines less even, the way a hand goes when it has gotten old or gotten sick. She touched one of the smudges with her thumb, and it was just a smudge, 60 years dry, and she sat with her thumb on it for a long time. She understood now why the cord was newer than the rest. Her father had not sealed these in the tank. He could not have. He was in a cell when he wrote them, and he died, she would learn, years after the line was sold. Somebody else had gathered them up after all the letters Pell had kept, and tied them with a new cord, and carried them up that ladder, and set them in the box, where her father had cut the place for them, and sealed the plate back over the lot of it. Somebody had finished the thing her father started, and could not finish himself. She did not know yet who, but the box had been built by one man and closed by another, and both of them had done it, for a girl neither of them was sure would ever come. She read until the letters ran out. The last was dated late, the hand barely his own. Pell, I'm out 2 years now, and there's nothing left to come out to. I went looking for her the day they let me go. Faye changed the girl's name and took her across 2 state lines, and I never found the thread of it. And a poor sick man can only knock on so many doors. The line's to be sold, they tell me. They'll let the tower stand because it's not worth the cost of pulling it down, which is the only mercy that crowd ever did me. Good. Let it stand. Everything I have is up in it, where the Pruitts can't reach. When she comes, and I have to believe she'll come, a girl finds her way back to her own ground in the end. See, she gets what's hers. Tell her it was always hers. Tell her I knew her name. And below that, in a different and shakier line, as if added another day, tell her none of it was about the money. It was the land they wanted from us. It always was. Make sure she understands that part, Pell. The rest, she can forgive. That part she ought to know. Nora looked up from the page. The fire was out. The tower stood black against a sky going gray at the edge, and the wind had dropped, and the whole flat country was silent in the way it gets just before dawn, holding its breath for the light. The land they wanted from us. She did not know yet what land or who they were, or what 40 years of hidden savings counted for now. She knew only that her father had bent his whole ruined life around a single thing he needed her to understand. And he had put it last underlined in a failing hand, and then he had run out of pages. She wrapped the letters back in their newer cord and put them in the box and closed the lid. Then she sat and waited for it to be light enough to climb the ladder again, because there was a tank to line and a winter coming, and because she could not, just yet, hold one more thing her father had left her. The tank held water on the 9th day. She had lined it a strip at a time, brushing the cold compound onto the scoured steel, working from the top seam down. When the last of it had cured, she rigged a tarp at the hatch like a funnel, and let a night of hard rain do the filling for her. And by morning there were a few inches of it pooled in the low end of the floor, enough to put the third seam under water and watch it. She had climbed up to check that seam, the one her father had pulled by hand 60 years before. It did not weep. By evening the water was still standing where she'd left it, and Nora stood under the legs of the tower in the failing light, and let herself feel, for about the length of a held breath, that she had done a thing right. Then she went and ate a can of beans cold off the spoon, because the work had eaten the daylight and she was too tired to build a fire. And that was the celebration. Renner had sold her the wire wheel for $3 in the end, and a brush thrown in. He had also, the last time, set a paper sack on the counter with the liner and not rung it up, and when she looked in it later there was a wedge of cornbread and 2 strips of bacon folded in a square of waxed paper, and no word said about it either way. She had eaten it on the slab in the rain. She did not know what to do with a kindness like that, so she did what she always did, which was to keep the waxed paper smoothed flat, in case she had a use for it. The truck started the second week. She heard them before. She saw them, the low diesel of a flatbed working the corridor where the old rails had been pulled, and then the closer crunch of a pickup on the lot road. It stopped at the gate that stuck. A man got down. He was maybe 60, heavy-set, in a canvas coat, with a company name stitched over the pocket, Pruitt Salvage and Aggregate, and he stood at the fence and looked at the tower a while before he looked at her. "That's a lot of work for a tank," he said. "It holds water now. I can see that." He took off his cap and put it back on, which was a thing men did when they were getting to the part they'd come for. "Name's Coyle. I run crews for Mr. Pruitt. We're pulling the old line through here, the rail, the ties, the scrap. There's salvage rights along the whole corridor." He nodded at the tank. "That tower's steel, good steel. Mr. Pruitt pay you to take it off your hands. Pay you more than the dollar you've got in it. I'll tell you that. It's not for sale." Coyle nodded slowly, like that was the answer he'd expected, and the asking was a formality somebody made him do. He reached over the fence and set a business card on the post, weighing it with a stone, so the wind wouldn't take it. "Things change," he said. "You think about it, hard winter is coming. Long way to haul water up that ladder when you could be somewhere warm." He said it without any meanness in it. That was the part that stayed with her. He said it the way you'd say it to a person you felt a little sorry for. He drove off. The card stayed on the post under its stone. She left it there. That night she went back into the box. She had read the journal twice through, and the letters more than that, but she had not gone carefully through the bundle of papers under the cord, the legal-looking ones, because they were dense and dry, and her eyes had been too full the first nights to take them in. Now she spread them on the slab by lantern light and went through them one by one, slowly, the way Renner went through a shelf. Most of it was railroad, pay records, a brakeman's certificate, a union card, but near the bottom, folded in thirds and soft along the folds, was a deed. She read it 3 times to be sure she had it right. It was made out to Walter J. Hale, and it conveyed to him free and clear a parcel of 41 acres lying east of the rail corridor, recorded in the county in the spring of 1979, 2 years before the trial. She did not know land, but she knew the shape of the corridor from walking it, and 41 acres east of it was the long flat ground the salvage trucks were working that very week, the ground a pipeline would want, the ground a man would build a quiet title claim around if he could find a way to say the dead owner's heir had no standing. It was the land they wanted from us. She sat back. It was not the tower they had ever wanted. The tower was steel, and $1, and a thing to laugh at. It was the 41 acres her father had bought with a brakeman's wage and never lived to use, and the trial that took his name had also conveniently taken his standing to hold it, and for 40 years the parcel had sat in a dead man's name while the law waited for somebody to come and claim it or fail too. Folded inside the deed was one more thing. A small flat key, brass, stamped with a number, and a card from the First Farmers Bank of Marston that named a safe deposit box held in trust, and a line of her father's square hand across the bottom of the card. Box is Pell's to hold, and the girl's to open. W.H. She did not sleep that night. She sat up with the key in her closed hand and watched the water in the pail go still and then go skinned with ice at the edges. And in the morning, she walked to town with the key and the deed and the bank card, wearing the cleanest shirt she had, which was not clean. The First Farmers Bank of Marston was a brick box on the corner, with a door that stuck the same as her gate. And she had to put her shoulder to it, which was not the entrance she'd have chosen. The woman at the desk was young and careful. She looked at the key and the card and Nora's face, and then she went and got a man named Brant, who was older and more careful still, and he took Nora into a back office and asked her to sit, and he carried in a second chair from the lobby himself, because there was only one. This box was opened in trust in 1983, Brant said, reading a screen, by a Mr. Harlan Pell, in his capacity as recorder. The instruction on file is that it passes to the heir of Walter Hale on proof of identity. He looked at her over his glasses. You're saying that's you? My name was Hale, she said. Before my mother changed it, I can get the records. It'll take time. It always takes time. He said it not unkindly. He set the key on the desk between them. I can't let you into it today, and I can't tell you what's in it, or what it's worth, or even that it holds anything at all. That waits until you prove who you are. That's the bank's part, and I'll hold to it. He folded his hands. Then he leaned back, and the neighbor said the part the banker couldn't. But there's an instruction on file with your father's name on it. And it's the kind a man does not leave by accident. Somebody meant for this to keep. Mr. Pell was a particular man, whatever. It's in that box. He guarded it like it was his own. Maybe more. Is he living? Brant hesitated, the way a small-town man hesitates when he's deciding how much to be the bank and how much to be a neighbor. Get me your proof, he said, and I'll tell you what I can. Which was not no. She walked back out past the careful young woman into the cold. And she had not gone half a block when a clean gray car pulled to the curb beside her and a man got out of it. And she knew, before he spoke, that this was the Pruitt the whole town had been warning her about by not quite saying his name. He was younger than she'd pictured, and tireder. 50s gray coming in at the temples, a good coat. He did not loom. He stood on the sidewalk, with a folder under his arm and a look on his face that was almost apologetic. And that was worse than looming. Mrs. Tillman. He knew her married name. He'd done his reading. I'm Del Pruitt. I'd hoped to catch you before this came in the mail. I find it goes better face to face. He held out the folder. She did not take it, so he held it a moment and then lowered it. My company filed a quiet title action on the corridor parcels, he said, including the tower lot. The county shouldn't have sold it at the tax sale. There's a reversion clause in the original railroad right-of-way. When the line was abandoned, the ground was supposed to revert, not get auctioned for $1. There's also a lien from '91 that was never cleared. I'm not telling you this to frighten you. I'm telling you so you don't spend a hard winter fixing a thing the court's going to take back in the spring. It was, she would understand later, all true enough to be dangerous. The reversion clause was real. The lien was real. A judge might look at a dead man's deed and a foreclosed widow's dollar and a 42-year-old trust and decide the simplest thing was to give the ground to the man, with the lawyers and the survey crew already on it. Pruitt was not lying. He was doing the thing his family had always done, which was to find the place where the law and the truth had come apart, and stand in the gap and call it order. Your grandfather, Nora said. Asa Pruitt. Something moved across his face, and it was not nothing. My grandfather's been dead 30 years. He's in my father's papers. Pruitt was quiet for a moment, longer than a man is quiet over a stranger's papers. There was a drawer in his office, locked, that had been Asa's, that he had moved from building to building for 20 years, and never once opened, the way you keep a thing you won't look at. because you have half guessed what is in it." He did not say that. He said carefully, "I don't know what's in your father's papers. I know the law on the corridor. The two don't have to be the same conversation." He set the folder on the hood of his car, weighing it the way Coyle had weighted the card, so the wind wouldn't take it. "There's a number in there. It's a fair number, more than fair, for what you'd net fighting it. Think about your winner, Mrs. Tillman." And then the small true thing that slipped out under the rest. "I had a daughter your age. I'd like somebody to tell her the hard part straight." He got in the car and drove off. And the folder sat on the post of the world the way the card had. And the wind did not take it because he'd known it wouldn't. She carried the folder back to the lot, but she did not open it. She knew what a fair number did to a person who had nothing. She had been that person for 2 years. A fair number was a warm room, and a real bed, and an end to the arithmetic, and all she had to do to earn it was let a Pruitt have the 41 acres her father had bought with his wages and lost his name over, which was the exact thing her father had spent, his last failing line of ink begging her to understand and not do. That night she packed. She did it without deciding to. She wrapped the watch in its cloth, and put the deed and the bank key in the box with the journal, and she sat on the slab with the folder in her lap and the lantern low, and she thought about how tired she was. 49 years old. 2 of them spent time moving. A family that had decided she was in debt, and here was a man offering to make the moving stop, and all it would cost was a fight she did not know how to win against people who had never once lost. 14 years of his fight, she thought, and I'm about to fold it for bus fare. She had the folder half open. The number was right there at the top of the first page, and it was, in fact, more money than she had seen in her life. She closed it, not out of strength. She would not have called it strength. She closed it because she could not make her hand earn the page with her father's letters 6 foot away in a steel box, and because a thing he'd written kept coming back to her, plain and square, in the hand of a man who'd had every reason in the world to quit, and had not. A man builds a thing so it'll be there after him. He had built 2 things, the tower to give water, and the trust to give her a way home. And a daughter who took a fair number and disappeared would be tearing down the second one with her own hands. She put the folder under a stone, outside in the cold, where she would not reach for it in the night. In the morning she went to find Harlan Pell. She started at the bank, and Brandt, true to his almost no, gave her what he could, which was that Pell had retired from the recorder's office a long time back, and was, as far as Brandt knew, still living, out at the Cedar Rest home on the county road, an old man now, well past 90. Brandt wrote the name of the place on a slip and pushed it across the desk, and said, "He doesn't get many visitors," and Nora could not tell if that was a warning or a kindness or just a fact, the way most things in that town were just facts laid on a table for you to make of what you would. She folded the slip into quarters and put it in her coat with the receipt and the waxed paper and the rest of the small evidence that people here and there had meant her well. Harlan Pell was still alive, the man who had hidden her father's name so the kindness would land on her clean. The man who had tied the letters with a newer cord climbed the ladder and finished the thing. Her father could not. He was 20 minutes up the county road, in a bed by a window, and he was the only person left in the world who knew the whole of it. The Cedar Rest home was a low brick building with a flag out front and a row of cars that hadn't moved in a while. A woman at the desk asked who she was there to see, and Nora said Harlan Pell, and the woman's face did a small surprised thing before she covered it. "He doesn't get many," the woman said. "You family?" Nora thought about how to answer that. "He held something for my father," she said, "a long time ago." That seemed to satisfy her more than family would have. She walked Nora down a hall that smelled of floor wax and supper, to a room near the end with a window that faced the county road, and there in a bed cranked half upright was an old man so thin the blanket barely rose over him. He was awake. That was the first thing. His eyes came around to the door, and they were clearer than the rest of him, and they fixed on her and stayed. "You'll be hers," he said. Not a question. She was getting used to that here. My name's Nora, she said. Nora Tillman. I was Hale. I know what you were. His voice was a dry thread, but the words came in order. Sit down. There's a chair somewhere. You'll have to find it. She found it against the wall under a stack of folded towels and carried it to the bed and sat. Up close, he was older than 90. Looked in her mind, the skin gone to paper, the hands on the blanket spotted and still. But the eyes worked, and the mind behind them worked, and when she set the brass key on the blanket where he could see it, the hands moved for the first time. One finger reaching out to touch it. He cut that key himself, Pell said. Down in the yard. Wouldn't trust a locksmith. Said a locksmith remembers. A sound came out of him that might have been a laugh once. Your father trusted about 4 people in his life. I was the 4th, and only because the other 3 were dead. You hit his name, Nora said. On the money. For me, he made me swear to it. Pell's eyes went to the window, to the road. Every cent that came, I put it under the county's name or the church's, never his. He didn't want you growing up beholden to a convict. Didn't want Faye sending it back out of spite, which she would have. So it came to you, clean, shoes once. A coat. Whatever Faye'd let me dress up as charity. The finger came off the key. She never knew it was him. You never knew it was him. That was the whole point of it, and I kept it for 40 years, and I'm the last one alive who can tell you. So you'll forgive an old man taking his time. Nora sat very still and let him take it. The money grew into a savings account, and the passbook's in the bank box, he said. Brant'll let you know when you prove it. There's a paid policy in there, too. Life insurance. Your father bought it the year before they came for him, and named you on it. He couldn't pay it from inside, so I paid it. Out of what he sent me, every quarter, so it wouldn't lapse. He paused for breath. It's not a fortune. It's enough. It was always meant to be enough and not more, because he didn't want it changing what you were. He wanted it giving you a floor to stand on. That was his word. A floor. The box in the tower, Nora said. The strongbox. You closed it. For a moment the old man didn't answer. His eyes came back from the window. He died in the spring of 2008, Pell said. In a rented room. I went up and got his things. It wasn't much. The journal. The pictures. And the letters. All the letters he'd sent me over the years, which I'd kept. Everyone. His jaw worked. He'd told me what he wanted, years before. He showed me the place he'd cut in the tank wall when he built the thing back in '75, before any of the trouble, before the girl was even born. A hiding place in his own good work. He said, when I'm gone, put it all in there and seal it, and let it wait. I told him that was a foolish thing to do. I told him to put it in the bank with the rest. He said the bank's for money. The tower's for her. She'll come to the tower. The room was quiet. Out on the road a truck went by and the window hummed with it and went still. So I did it, Pell said. I was 76 years old and I climbed that ladder with a satchel and a rivet gun, and I cut the plate back in and I sealed it. And I'll tell you, Mrs. Tillman, I did not believe you'd come. I thought I was sealing it for the rust. A man does a thing for a friend whether he believes in it or not. The clear eyes held her. And here you are. 31 years that line's been dead, and nobody touched that ground, and the spring you turn up, you climb the one place in the county he hid it. So maybe he knew you better dead than I knew you living. I'd believe it. There was a practical thing that had been sitting under all of it, and she asked for it. The land. 41 acres in a dead man's name for 40 years. Why didn't the county take it for taxes the way they took the tower? The old man's mouth moved near the shape of satisfaction. Because I paid them, he said. Every winter, out of the trust, the land taxes, never $1 over the bill, never late. Kept that parcel off the rolls and out of any sale, year on year, so it would be there clean when you came. He drew a slow breath. The tower lot I let go. On purpose, his purpose. Walt wanted that tower cheap enough that whoever it was meant for could buy it for almost nothing, the way you did. So I stopped paying the tax on that one lot and let it fall to the county sale. His hand moved on the blanket, and every year it came up, I drove down and sat in the back of that room with my heart in my mouth, because the box was still up in it. If some scrapper had raised a hand, I'd have bid him to the moon to get it back. 31 years nobody ever raised a hand. Until this spring, when the clerk read it out, and a woman paid her $1. He let his head settle into the pillow. I heard the next day somebody finally bought the tower. I knew it was you before they ever told me your name. Nora found she could not speak for a moment. She reached into her coat, passed the receipt and the waxed paper and the folded slip, and took out the watch in its cloth. And she did not know why she did it, except that she wanted the old man to see she carried something too. She unwrapped it and held it out on her palm. The frozen hands, the 11. Pell looked at it for a long time. "That's not his," he said gently. "That's the husband's, I'd guess. It stopped when he died, and you stopped carrying it." He nodded slowly, as if she'd told him something he already knew about her. "Your father did the same with a thing of his own. We're a family for that." Carrying the stopped ones, he let his head go back against the pillow. He was tired. She could see it. But there was something he hadn't said, and he knew it, and he gathered himself to say it. "There's a paper you need," he said. "It's not in the tower box. I kept it back. Couldn't bear to seal it where it might never get read, and couldn't bear to be the one to show it to you either. It's in the bank box with the rest. Brant has it. When you open that box, you read the long folded one first. Before the money, you hear me? What is it?" The old man closed his eyes. "It's the reason you grew up thinking he ran," he said. She went to the bank the next morning, with the proof she'd managed to gather overnight, which was not complete, but which Brant, who had clearly made up his mind to be the neighbor and not the bank, decided to accept. He took her into the vault himself, and drew the long box and set it on the table, and left her alone with it, and pulled the door to. She opened it. The passbook was there, the trust account, the balance more than she let herself read. The policy was there, the paid-up policy with her name typed on it, her old name, Nora Hale, age 4. And on top, folded the long way, soft along the creases, the way a thing gets when one man is unfolded, and refolded it 100 times across 40 years, was a single court document. She read it standing up. It was an order of the district court, dated the autumn of 1981. It granted to one Fay Hale, on petition, sole custody of the minor child Nora Hale, and it granted, on the joint petition of Fay Hale and one Asa Pruitt, a restraining order against the child's father, Walter J. Hale, then incarcerated, barring him from any contact, written or otherwise, with the said minor child for the duration of his sentence, and for a period of 10 years thereafter. She read it again. Barring him from any contact, written or otherwise. He had not run. He had not gone silent because he was no kind of man. He had been forbidden by a court. On a petition that Asa Pruitt, the man who had engineered the theft that took his name, the man who wanted the 41 acres, had signed his own name, alongside Fay's, to make sure that the father could never reach the daughter to tell her any of it. They had taken his freedom in one courtroom and his child in another, and they had done it close together, on purpose, so that by the time he came out there would be nothing left to come out to. And for 14 years, forbidden by law to write to his own girl, he had written to Pell instead. $11. $43. The girl would be 6 now. The girl would be 8. He had counted her from inside a silence the law had built around him. And when the law's silence finally ran out, the years had done their own work, because by then Fay had changed the girl's name and moved her across 2 state lines, and an old sick man with no money had no way to find her. So he had spent his last years making sure that when she finally came, she'd come to the tower. She would find not just the money, but the truth of why he'd never come for her. That it was never that he didn't want her. It was that they would not let her be wanted out loud, and then they had hidden her too well for him to undo it. Nora put the document down on the table in the quiet vault and put both her hands flat on either side of it, and stood there with her head down. She did not cry, exactly. It went past crying into something stiller. She thought of a man holding a baby up in a rail yard, so the first thing she heard would be the thing he was good at. She thought of the same man, gray and dying in a rented room, telling a friend to climb a ladder he was too old to climb, and seal a box for a girl who might never come, because he could not bear for her to grow up thinking what they had made her think. She had been chosen, not loved in the ordinary way, and then lost. Chosen and fought for, in a silence so complete she had mistaken it her whole life for abandonment. She gathered it all up. The passbook, the policy, the order. She put them in the box and carried the box out to Brant and said she would need copies of the court order, certified, and Brant looked at her face and did not ask why. After that, it went the way real things go, slowly, through offices. She took the order and her father's letters to a lawyer 2 towns over who did pro bono work for the Legal Aid Society, a young woman named Ainsley who read the whole bundle at her kitchen table, and then sat back and said, "Mrs. Tillman, I think your father was framed, and I think I can prove the custody petition was part of it, and I think when I put those 2 things in front of the court, your Mr. Pruitt's quiet title claim falls apart because his whole standing rests on your father's conviction being clean." And it wasn't. The mechanism, once it started, was just paper and dates. Ainsley filed to have Harlan Pell's account entered as a sworn deposition, taken at his bedside before a notary, and the old man gave it in his dry, clear thread of a voice. Every cent and every year, while the notary's recorder turned. Ainsley pulled the original payroll ledger and the yard manifests from the county archive, the ones that should have been lost and weren't. Because a recorder named Pell had quietly filed certified copies 40 years before and noted exactly where. And on the manifest from the week of the theft, in a different ink from the rest, in a hand that was not her father's, an entry had been changed. And the man who had signed the order altering nothing and authorizing everything, the man whose name was on the custody petition and on the council vote that took the corridor, Asa Pruitt, had a grandson, now, who had filed a claim that depended entirely on none of this ever being read aloud in open court. The hearing was set for the 2nd Tuesday in December. The evening before it, an old man's lantern came to her. A nurse drove out from Cedar Rest, with it on the seat of her car, a brakes and signal lantern, the kind with the red and the clear lens. The brass gone dark with age and handling. There was a note in Pell's hand, the last thing he would write. This was Walt's. He set it down the day they took him and never picked it up. "Seems to me you ought to be the one. H.P." The nurse said he'd had her find it in his own things that morning. She said he'd been particular about it before the hearing, not after. She did not say the other thing, the thing in her face. And Nora did not make her say it. Nora set the lantern on the slab. The wick was old, but the brass was sound. 31 years the tower had stood dark over a dead line, and longer than that the lantern had sat in a box in an old man's room. Set down by a man on the day his whole life was taken from him, waiting, the way everything in this story had waited, for the one person it was meant for. She did not light it that night. There was a thing to do first, in a room with a seal on the wall, and she meant to do it before she lit anything. The hearing on the quiet title action was held in the district courtroom on the 2nd floor of the courthouse, under a seal and a flag, and a clock that ran 4 minutes fast. There were benches for the public, and the long bench for the judge, and a smaller table to the zos, where a clerk kept the record. It was the same building, Nora had learned, where the order had been signed in 1981. The same seal on the wall. She had thought that would feel like something. Walking in, it mostly felt cold. Pruitt was already there, in the good coat, with 2 lawyers and a roll of survey maps. Ainsley came in with a banker's box of paper and set it down without hurry. Renner was in the 3rd row, in a clean shirt, holding his cap. Brant sat behind him. A few others she half knew from the bank, and that had come too, and sat. And she could not have said why they'd come, except that in a town that size the knowing ran ahead of everything, and they had heard, and they wanted to see. The judge called it to order and read the matter into the record. A quiet title action by Pruitt Salvage and Aggregate. A reversion clause. A tax sale the company said was void. Pruitt's lawyer spoke first, and he was good, and it took him 11 minutes to make the simplest version of a true thing. The line was abandoned. The ground reverted. The county heired. Hell in selling it. There was a lien. Mrs. Tillman's deed rested on a dead man's title, and the dead man's affairs had never been settled, and the cleanest course was to quiet the title in the company's favor and let the development proceed. He did not once raise his voice. He did not have to. He had the law on the corridor, and the law on the corridor was real. Then Ainsley stood. The company's claim, she said, rests entirely on one thing: that Walter Hale's title was clouded, that he was a convicted thief who left his affairs in disorder and his heir without standing. Everything Mr. Pruitt has told you flows from that. So, I'd like to put the conviction in front of you, because it's the foundation of his whole house, and I don't think it holds. She took the lid off the box. She read the payroll ledger first, the certified copy a recorder had filed 40 years ago, and noted exactly where. And she showed the court the yard manifest from the week of the theft, and she showed them the line on it that had been altered, in an ink that did not match, in a hand that was not Walter Hale's. She read the certificate of the man who had examined it. She did it flatly, in order the way the strongest things get said. Then she read Harlan Pell into the record. The deposition had been taken at his bedside, before a notary, 3 weeks earlier. Ainsley read it aloud because the man who gave it could not be there, and partway through the reading she paused and said, for the record, that Mr. Pell had passed on the 4th of December and that this was his sworn account, given knowing he would not live to give it again. The room was very quiet for that. Nora kept her eyes on her own hands. She had known from the nurse's face the evening of the lantern. She had not let herself know it until now. Pell's voice came into the room through Ainsley's, dry and plain and in order to the end. Every cent, every year. The money hidden under the county's name and the church's, so it would land on the girl clean. The account, the policy, the floor a father wanted his daughter to stand on. And the manifest, the real one, that Pell had seen before it went missing, that he had filed a certified copy of, because he was a particular man who did not trust a thing he could not hold. And then Ainsley laid down the last paper, and it was the custody order, and she read the names on the joint petition. Fay Hale and Asa Pruitt, the man who altered the manifest, Ainsley said, and the man who petitioned the court to bar Walter Hale from ever contacting his own child are the same man. He took the father's name in one courtroom and the father's daughter in another. And he did it to clear the way for the very ground this company is standing here today to claim. The conviction wasn't incidental to the land. The conviction was how they got the land. Mr. Pruitt's standing rests on his grandfather's crime, and the crime is in your record now. She sat down. The room did not erupt. It was not that kind of room. There was only a long quiet, and the clock that ran fast, and the judge waiting without hurry, and Del Pruitt sitting very still in his good coat with the survey maps rolled up in front of him, and not touching them. His lawyer leaned over and said something low. Pruitt did not answer right away. The clerk had set the exhibits at the end of the clerk's table, and, among them, face up, was the certified copy of the payroll ledger, and the signature at the bottom of the page that authorized the week's manifest, the original, false one, was a signature Del Pruitt had seen his whole life. On deeds, on the company's own founding papers, on a photograph in his office, he would say later, of a man he had been raised to be proud of. He reached out and turned the ledger toward himself and looked at it. Then, he put his hand flat on his lawyer's arm, the way you stop a man mid-sentence, and the lawyer stopped. "Don't," Pruitt said, quietly, not to the room, to the lawyer. He stood. He did not make a speech. He had not made one the whole time, and he did not start now. "Your Honor," he said. His voice was steady, but it had something in it that had not been there on the sidewalk. "Pruitt Salvage withdraws the claim. All of it. The tower lot and the corridor parcels. I'd ask the court to leave Mrs. Tillman's deed exactly where it is." The judge asked him for the record to be sure. "I'm sure," Pruitt said. He was looking at the ledger, not the judge. "I came in here to settle a piece of ground. I didn't know what I was standing on." He folded the survey maps without rolling them, which is a thing a man does when his hands have stopped being careful. And he picked up his coat, and on his way out he stopped at the side table where Nora sat, and he did not offer his hand, because he seemed to understand it would not be taken. "My grandfather built everything I have," he said, low, just to her. "I'm going to have to go home and figure out what that means." And then the small true thing, the one he'd carried in with him. "I told you I had a daughter your age. I'd have wanted somebody to put the real paper in front of her." He nodded once, and he left. And that was the whole of the reckoning, and it was enough. The judge did the rest in the dry language of the court. With the claim withdrawn, he dismissed the quiet title action against the tower lot, and confirmed the tax deed sale to Nora Tillman as valid. On the evidence Ainsley had entered, he quieted the 41-acre parcel in the name of the heir of Walter Hale, which was to say, in her name. And he ordered the record of the hearing, the altered manifest and the deposition, and the rest, sent to the district attorney. With a finding that the conviction of Walter J. Hale appeared to rest on a falsified document and ought to be reviewed for a posthumous vacatur. And the judge, an older man who had grown up in that county and had heard the name once at his own father's table, did a thing the language of the court did not require. He read Walter Hale's name into the record a second time. Slowly, and the dates of his service on the line, the way you'd read an honest man's name if you were trying, late and inadequately, to put it back where it belonged. Nora sat in the folding chair in the cold, bright room, and heard her father's name said out loud, in the building that had erased it, by a man with no reason to say it but that it was true. That was the thing she had come for. Not the land, not the money. She had not known it until she heard it, but it was this. A room full of the county's paper, and a seal on the wall, and her father's name finally standing in it, clean. She did not stay for the handshakes. There was one more paper she had not read, sealed, since before she understood any of it, and she had promised herself she would read it in the right place. She gathered her copies, and she thanked Ainsley, who said the only thing worth saying, which was nothing, just a hand on the shoulder. And she drove back out the county road to the tower, where a brakeman's lantern sat waiting on a cold slab and a sealed envelope sat waiting in a steel box, both of them set down long ago by men who had believed, against the evidence of their own lives, that she would come. Spring came late that year, and then all at once. By April, the 41 acres east of the corridor had gone green with the volunteer grass that comes up on ground. Nobody's worked in 40 years, and the tower stood over it full, 1,000 gallons of caught rain held in a tank a brakeman built and his daughter Relind. Nora had run a line down from it to a standpipe by the gate, and a second line to a small frame building she and Renner had put up over the winter on the old pump house slab. It had a stove and a long bench and a sink with water that ran when you turned it, and a sign Renner had lettered because her hand wasn't steady enough for paint. The sign said Hales, warm room water, no charge. It was for the people who came through on the county road with no place to be. There were more of them than a person would think, in a county that size. They came off the highway and the freight had stopped running, but the walking hadn't, and Nora knew the look of them from the inside, the bracing, the way a person carries a bag, who has learned that new places are usually worse than the last one. She fed them and let them wash, and asked them nothing. That was the rule. Renner brought cornbread on Saturdays and did not ring it up. Del Pruitt came once, in April, alone, in a pickup and not the gray car. He stood at the gate that no longer stuck because she'd fixed the hinge in March, and he waited until she came over. He had a roll of paper under his arm, and for a bad second it looked like the survey maps, and then she saw it was not. The original ledger, he said, and the manifest, the real ones. The county had certified copies, but these are the originals out of my grandfather's files. They were in a drawer in the office I'd kept locked for 20 years and never opened. He held them out. I thought about burning them. I want you to know, I thought about it. Then I thought you ought to be the one who decides what happens to them. He set them on the gatepost, the old habit, weighting them with his hand instead of a stone this time. And then he took his hand away and let them sit there unweighted, in the still spring air, which did not take them. You could have kept them, Nora said. Nobody knew they existed. I knew, he said. That was all. He looked past her at the tower, at the warm room, at a man in a borrowed coat sitting on the bench inside with a cup of coffee. My grandfather built everything I have, he said again, the way he'd said it in the courthouse. Except this time it sounded less like an old hurt, and more like a question he'd decided to live inside. I'm trying to build something he wouldn't recognize. It's slow. He nodded at the sign. This is a good thing you've got here. He didn't stay. He wasn't owed staying, and he seemed to know it. But he'd come, and he'd brought the paper, and on his way out he'd looked at the warm room a beat too long. The way a man looks at a thing he's deciding whether he's allowed to want. The door was open. She left it open. What he did with it was his. The girl came in May. She was 17, maybe, thin, with a trash bag of clothes in one hand and sneakers coming apart at the toe, and she stood at the gate, the way they all stood at the gate, reading the place before she'd trust it. She'd seen the sign from the highway. Is that for real? She said. The no-charge part. It's for real. Come in. There's soup and the water's hot. The girl didn't move yet. What's the catch? No catch. Somebody did it for me once. Nora held the gate. You hungry? The girl came through, the bag bumping her leg, and sat at the long bench, and ate the way a person eats who isn't sure when the next one's coming, and Nora didn't ask her a single question, because she had learned from the inside that the worst thing you can do to someone who's scared and hungry is make them account for it. She talked about the tower instead, about the water, about a man named Renner who brought cornbread and wouldn't take a cent. After a while, the girl's shoulders came down from around her ears, and that was enough for one day. That night, when the warm room was quiet and the girl was asleep, on the cot by the stove, Nora climbed the ladder with the strongbox and the lantern, and she sat in the open hatch of the tank with her feet on the top rung and the cold spring stars coming out over the flat country, and she took out the last envelope. To the one who keeps the tower. She had carried it through everything, unopened, because some part of her had known from the first night that it was the thing you read when you finally understood the rest. And she understood the rest now. She broke the seal. The hand was her father's. The square plain hand gone shaky at the end, the way it had gone in the last of the letters to Pell. If you're reading this, it said, you climbed the tower, so you're the one. Maybe you're my Nora. Pell thinks you'll be. I have to believe him because I can't do the rest of this on hope alone. I want to tell you the thing they made sure I could never tell you. I did not leave. When you were small, a court forbade me to write to you or come near you, and I obeyed it, because the one time I didn't, your mother moved you somewhere I couldn't follow, and I was afraid I'd lose even knowing that you were alive. By the time the order ran out, you were grown and gone under another name, and a poor sick man can search only so far. I have spent a long time afraid you'd grow up, thinking my quiet meant I didn't want you. It was the opposite. It was the loudest wanting I had. I just had no place left. They'd let me say it. The money's a floor. Stand on it. Don't spend your life on it. The land's yours. Do something with it that you'd be glad to have your name on. And the tower. The tower I'm leaving you on purpose. Because it's the best thing I ever made, and I want the best thing I made to belong to the best thing I made. You'll understand that, or you won't. Either way, it's true. I held you in the yard the day you were born, so the first thing you'd hear from me would be the thing I was good at. I never got to give you the rest, so I'm giving it to you now, late through a box and a friend and a tower, which is the only way they left me. Build something. Stay somewhere. Be wanted out loud, the way I couldn't make them let you be. I knew your name the whole time. Walter Hale. Nora folded the letter along its old creases and held it in her lap, and she did not cry, exactly. It had gone past crying into something stiller, the way it had in the vault. She sat in the hatch of the tower her father built, and let the wanting in, the loud quiet wanting that had been waiting for her in the steel since before she was born. Then she took out the watch. She'd carried it for 2 years, wound it every morning to no purpose, kept it in the cloth over the place it belonged. "We're a family for that," Pell had said, carrying the stopped ones. She held it up in the starlight, the frozen hands, the 11, and she thought about her husband, who had been kind to her when his family wasn't, and about her, who had been kept from her his whole life, and about the difference between carrying a thing that was lost and carrying a thing that was simply over. She wound the watch one last time. Then she set it down on the rim of the hatch, gently, the way you set down a thing you're done carrying. She let it stay stopped. She left it there on her father's tower, where the stopped time could rest, and she did not put it back in her pocket. She climbed down with the lantern. It was Walt's, the brakeman's signal lantern he'd set down the day they took him and never picked up, brass, gone dark, the red lens and the clear. The wick was old, but she'd trimmed it, and she'd found oil in Renner's store, and she filled it now at the foot of the tower and struck a match. The flame caught and steadied, and threw its small light across the slab, across the warm room where a girl who'd had no place was sleeping, across the standpipe running clean water from a tank that had been dry 31 years. Nora carried the lantern up and hung it on the hook by the hatch, where a signalman would have hung it to bring a train to safety. And it burned out over the dark country, the first light that tower had shown in 3 decades. She stood under it for a while in the cold. A signal doesn't burn for the train that has already passed. It burns for the one still coming in.